Players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most powerful in the history of Magic the Gathering: Doomsday, Thassa's Oracle, Angel's Grace, and many others. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory, yo.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind BoshNRoll on YouTube, ThrabenU University, and theepicstorm.com.
Hello, and welcome to episode 61 of the Eternal Glory podcast, anything but legacy. I'm Phil Gallagher, joined by Bryant Cook and Brian Coval. How y'all doing tonight?
I am excited to not talk about legacy, Phil. Format sucks.
I mean, like, it's cool because we're gonna get changes to the format, right? Like, maybe.
While I don't share the format sucks opinion, I'm also excited to talk about vintage and modern and like whatever else. We'll talk about legacy a little bit, but this is primarily not a legacy episode.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about modern. I guess I'll just start talking. While these two were playing in Eternal Weekend, I just like dicked around all weekend and played modern. I recorded 7 leagues over the extended weekend, and it just felt good. Like, just casually, as I wanted to, I just fired up modern leagues and burned through them.
Yeah, modern rules so hard. I get excited every time I get asked to play it. I played a local event recently, a paper team event, and I was in the modern seat, and the games are all just really good. Like, the power level of modern, I mean, we'll talk about this later, but Modern Horizons 2, while it was a paradigm shift, like it just cranked the power dial beyond 10, everyone got a toy. So it's like everyone is just firing space lasers now.
Oh god, yeah, the decks are so good. Everything is stupid.
What's going on in your lives? We'll get into that later.
All right, I guess I'll start. So I'm a teacher. I got a long Thanksgiving break. Like, I got done working Tuesday and didn't report back in until Monday. And I needed that. Like, I haven't had a chunk of time just like truly off in a long time. And I just like played a lot of Magic. I played the Binding of Isaac Repentance for Switch, which recently came out, and it's so good and it's everything that I wanted. So my week was just like eat food, drink, record video, play Dungeons and Dragons, repeating in some order, with the drinking always coming after the recording because I'm not a total mad lad.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds really nice. And as someone who worked in education for 10 years and now no longer works in education, it's both like it's kind of shocking to me to hear you talk about like, oh yeah, it's that, winter's coming, end of fall, everyone can see Christmas break or holiday break on the horizon, and we're all just dragging. And I was like, yeah, I do remember that. It's so nice to be somewhere else. Not to rub it in your face, but just like being an educator was just like such a big part of my life for so long, and I'm like, oh yeah, it would be that time of year, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's teaching garbage time. Teaching garbage time happens in December and like second half of May, where you're kind of going through the motions to get over the finish line.
March is like the Trail of Tears. Please don't cancel me for saying that. But like March is like there's no breaks. There's nothing to look forward to. There's no holidays. That is a full month of you're in the classroom 5 days a week, and March sucks. March was always my worst month when I was in the schools.
My school has a couple of random days off in March to combat that exact thing because it's well known.
Yes, good job. Well played. Invent a holiday. I don't give a shit. Let us out.
So speaking of, you were talking about catching up on video games, Phil. While I was playing in the pair of Eternal Weekends, you know how we're always recording videos with our free time and sometimes other stuff gets left behind because we're too busy recording videos? Well, I had a stack of comic books that I would look at it and be like, I should probably read one of these just so this pile goes down. And then next month's shipment would come in. Between the 6 Eternal Weekend events that I played, every round I just read another comic book, and I completely erased my pile by the end of it. So I was pretty excited by that. I'm looking over there now and it's just empty. It's a plant.
I am so excited for you that you got to do that. Like, that's so gratifying. Like, it just feels good to just like kick back and like do the things that have been on your eternal to-do list.
Especially it's fun. I feel it, but it sucks. Like the idea of looking at a pile of something you enjoy and being like, oh god, like it becomes a chore. Like when you get the backlog, and then you're like, oh, I gotta play my way through this game, or I gotta read all those damn comic books that I love. Like being able to like find the time and stop being an adult and just do it. I did a similar thing. I had been meaning to watch the anime One Piece, which a friend of mine, Calvin Hodges, shout out to Calvin. He posts about it all the time, like he's really into it, and I generally trust his taste in things. And One Piece is one of those like hundreds of episodes things that just exist.
Sir, it's over 1,000.
Oh, is it? Good. Yeah, so thousands of episodes in between rounds of Eternal Weekend. I only played 4 of the events. I didn't get all 6 in, and we'll talk about what else I did shortly. But in the 4 events I played, Netflix has the first 4 seasons of One Piece, which seasons, it's all made up. There's like 100 episodes per season. Who knows what that means? But I had it on at 1.5 speed and just shredded through like 2 or 3 episodes in between each round of all 4 tournaments. And I'm like 50 episodes in at this point.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it's great. I'm not sure that I'm in love with the show, but it was the perfect sort of thing that like you can put on at 1.5 speed and just let it run while you sit in your chair waiting for a Magic tournament to fire.
I always feel awkward sorry to always talk about being a content creator, everyone, but when you're streaming live to Twitch, you finish your round and you go, okay, there's 35 minutes left. What can I fit in? And then you try to start another match, but then you get paired against someone that's just like in the middle of taking a dump or walking their dog, and you don't really know what they're doing, but they're taking forever. And before you know it, you're double queuing. Watching that gives me anxiety. And when you're recording Magic for YouTube, you just don't have any of that. You get to relax for that time in between. And it's just a very different experience as the content creator.
Yeah, when I was streaming live, I never got into a groove where I was okay with like dead air or okay with living my life just on the stream. Because like the really comfortable streamers, you see them, they're just like, all right, we're between rounds. I'm going to go grab some food. And then they're just streaming an empty chair for like 6 or 7 minutes while they go make a bowl of cereal. They come back in the room, they just kick back, eat their cereal, read the chat, whatever. Like I never hit that level of comfort. Every night that I streamed, I was just like starving and my head hurt because I didn't eat, and I was just constantly dancing and like, yeah, I never found that groove.
So for my life updates, they'll be pretty quick, and as always, they're probably about some bad TV show I'm watching. Hawkeye came out, and they released the first 2 episodes. I didn't look at anything about it before, just watching the first 2. I didn't want it to be ruined for me. But I did read the comic book comics that came out in 2013. It was like 2013 and 2014, they won Best Comic back-to-back year, and that's why I started reading them. The intro animations of the show are directly out of the comic books, which I thought was just like super sweet. It's like the same illustrator and the same style. So that's kind of cool. It also has Kate Bishop in it, if you're into that. The plot, not so much, but so far so good. I definitely recommend checking it out.
I didn't read the comic books, and I did watch the 2 episodes, and I enjoyed them.
And then the next thing, I'm just like a decade behind, probably even more on this. My wife was like, you know, you would really like Brooklyn Nine-Nine if you would just sit down and watch it. And I was like, it's like 10 seasons. Who has time for that? And she's like, you do. We're going to watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And now we're 4.5 seasons in, and I just like can't wait to watch another episode every night.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's in that space of like Schitt's Creek or whatever. That's just like a many season show that you can put on when you have 20 minutes and you'll be happy with the time you spent. But it's also not like cliffhangers. It's not story driven. It's not like Breaking Bad where you just want to fire up the next one immediately and you're like grumpy when you have to go to bed. Like it's nice. Love it.
I won't lie. I think the reason why I never watched it was I assumed that it was the same thing as Reno 911. And I was like, that show looks really stupid. I'm just not going to watch any of these cop shows.
Yeah, Reno 911 was ahead of its time and somehow also behind its time. I still regularly say, I'm just goofing, new boot goofing, anytime I put boots on, and nobody ever gets the reference. And by your 2 faces right now, neither do you.
No, I mean, I have watched individual episodes of that show while channel surfing, but was not a fan.
Yeah, it's something.
All right. Anyone else want to say anything about life updates, or should we just get into it?
I just want to say I hosted Thanksgiving for 11 people, myself included. 2 sides of the family, girlfriend's family, my family, everyone's parents in the same room. My grandma was there, and it was a smashing success, I will say. My first attempt at a turkey came out a little dry. We used an oven bag, which is like a tried and true secret that not everyone does. It like keeps the turkey moist and cuts the cooking time in half. And we did everything with the bag except remember to cut the cooking time in half. So it did come out a little dry despite our best efforts. You're supposed like a well-cooked turkey, according to the internet, the government says you want it to be 165 degrees. Chefs say you want it to be 150. Ours was easily 200 when I put the temp in at like the first temp check. And I was like, oh yeah, we didn't account for the bag's cooking speed. Whoops. But other than some dry turkey, it was extremely successful. Nobody went to fisticuffs or shouted over politics or anything. It was a good time. A bold first outing for like a real family thing hosted at our house.
I do have something to say about Thanksgiving, Brian. Thank you for reminding me. I'm sure you might have seen on Thanksgiving, Twitter was attacking people that like ham. I don't know why, but I love ham. I grew up eating a lot of ham. I also like turkey, but people were just like, ham is for garbage feeders. Turkey's the only thing you should be eating. Like, just people with very strong takes. And, well, fuck you guys.
Yeah, I actually grew up really disliking the entire Thanksgiving spread. Like, turkey was among my least favorite meats to eat. I hate cranberry sauce to this day. Stuffing's not a favorite of mine. I don't like pumpkin or apple pie. Just, like, the whole spread. I was known as a kid for just, like, subsisting on dinner rolls on Thanksgiving night. I just didn't like any of the food. And I've come around on turkey. One of my uncles has this awesome Italian sausage stuffing recipe that really, like, zaps it up to a place where I'm very happy eating it. Still hate cranberry sauce. When my family realized I was just like nibbling on bread rolls for several years in a row, like ham or lasagna or some like alternate entree became part of like the family tradition. And I'm a grown up now. I like turkey. But yeah, ham rules. If you're a hater, get fucked.
Exactly. Going back to your stuffing bit, as an adult, everyone's like, oh, you should try my stuffing. It's so good. Blah, blah, blah. I always eat it. I'm like, yeah, this is fine. But I grew up in a family that didn't have a whole lot of money, and our stuffing was always like boxed stovetop stuffing. That's what I want every year for Thanksgiving. I know it's literally just cardboard, but that's what I think of when I think of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, why don't we go ahead and hop into donations then? Thank you to Brendan McGrail, Matthew Hackbert, and Paul Vandenbroek for supporting our podcast and lining our editor's wallet with those sweet, sweet dollar bills.
At Force of Phil.
Of course, I thought someone else was going to pick up, but like we just got that awkward silence. Maybe Phil will edit that out. Maybe he'll like edit in him giving us some shit. Who knows?
Maybe he'll add a rap, an intro rap. Just be your own hype man, Phil. Stick something in there.
Give me a goddamn hell yeah. It's Force of Philip on the track, and we got a special treat today. Featuring on the track with me is my man, Me the Captain. Me the Captain, what it do? So you see, we've been getting done dirty by Right of Flame as of late, so we figured it's time we done did it dirty back. Let's go. When we light up the stage, it's Right of Flame you be casting. We were dumb and naive to think the worst that could happen was a couple sloppy goblins bombarding the red zone like Harden after he guzzled the dozen dome. Who's playing Boros unless they're dyslexic? This ain't 2012, it's 2021 and it's hectic. Every card's got 10 yards of text like the scripture. Right of Flame paints the game's image, big picture. It's for the hell of the game. While we quarantine in the midst of pandemic, it's tough to send pizza or post signs at your entrance. You could be our heroes by boosting morale. Just ban Right of Flame like wishing for a card in exile. Oh no. Don't do that actually, because you'll get DQ'd. But you could stop global warming and save these fucking dolphins if you just ban Right of Flame. Ban Right of Flame, save the dolphins. Hashtag ban Right of Flame, hashtag save the dolphins. Let's go.
Or don't. Whatever. What's going on in Magic World? We We said we're not going to talk about Legacy much, and we're not. So I'll talk about Legacy here instead of in the body of the episode. I played the Buffalo Chicken Dip Legacy Open in Columbus, Ohio. That was during the first Saturday of Eternal Weekend, during the Legacy portion of Eternal Weekend. So I missed the first 2 events. I didn't do the DGen overnight thing. I went to Columbus to play Legacy in paper instead. And that event rules. The premise is exactly what it sounds like, where the TO cooks up several crock pots of buffalo chicken dip, and it's just there for you throughout the day. You can eat it, and that comes with your entry. So we got to play Legacy, paper Legacy. It was a lot of fun, and I gorged myself on buffalo chicken dip. We had a great time over there. If you're in the general Ohio strike zone, I would recommend keeping tabs on that. They have a Twitter and stuff. I will find the handle. Since I just plugged it, I should know what I'm talking about.
I did have a really cool 5.0 in Legacy with a mono white painter brew. The person had been working on it for quite a while and was like, I can't quite get the 5.0. I think you can do it. The deck list's really good. It had some crazy Oswald Fiddlebender lines that were just absolutely absurd. One of the most grindy decks that I've ever played.
I will thumbs up any video where the description includes, there's some sweet Oswald Fiddlebender lines. Like, just say those words. I'm in. You can 05. I'll still watch it.
The video is exploding on YouTube right now. It's awesome. And it's just also one of those leagues where, like, okay, I've got it unless this really fringe thing happens. And, like, there's just a lot of those moments where, like, I call the thing that beats me and then, like, try to have to dig myself out of the hole.
Start bending those fiddles.
Like, I expected the card to be kind of bad. I'd played with it once before. It didn't really do anything. And then, like, once Urza's Saga and Retrofitter Foundry are in the deck, so that, like you just have 0-drops that you can just, like, turn into grindstones at will, it becomes really stupid.
By the way, Buffalo Chicken Dip Legacy, I found the thing. It's at BCD Legacy on Twitter. Just BCD for Buffalo Chicken Dip, then the word Legacy.
Shout out to Robert Wilson, the TO. Great guy. Listener of the podcast.
Yeah, I lost him in round 2, so clearly the tournament's rigged, but if you can get over that, it's a good experience. And just dodge Robert.
So the other thing I'm really excited to do, and I'm going to record this tomorrow, is that Magic Online is doing an event with ridiculous banned decks from throughout Modern's history, where you get to, like, play with things that are currently banned. You have to play set deck lists, but, like, you can pick from, like, Mox Opal Affinity, Birthing Pod, Splinter Twin, and all of that stuff. And, like, I've waxed poetic on this cast about how much I fucking love Splinter Twin enough times that people know, like, given this opportunity, I'm 100% taking it.
They did something similar previously.
Is my GP winning Urza deck in the pool? That thing is banned as fuck these days. They banned 5 different cards out of that deck.
No, so each deck only has 1 banned card.
Oh, it was too broken to qualify by a lot. I love that.
I do know that the last time that they did this, Jarvis Yu and Mike Noble went through each and every deck list and found irregularities. They would be like, well, you cut this deck list down to 61 and you cut Cryptic Command, you probably should have cut the main deck Celestial Purge that was a metagame call for the time. Or they swapped, like, a Revoke Existence with a Disenchant and another one. So there's just, like, some weird changes in some of these decks.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that the Splinter Twin 75 that is available for the event is optimal, but I sure as hell am playing it. Like, you're giving me the drug, like, just inject it into my veins, like, side effects can come later, whatever.
Do you select, I'd like to play Splinter Twin, or do you queue up and it hands you something?
I believe you select. I'm going to be so pissed if I, like, start recording that event, hype up Splinter Twin, and then I'm just, like, playing fucking Affinity. Like, I can do that now.
They've done these in the past with, like, the best standard deck throughout history or whatever, and I think it was just, like, you queue up and they give you one, but I didn't actually play it, so maybe I'm making shit up.
I think you get to pick, but I'm not 100% sure.
It's a better experience if you get to pick. I think one of the feedbacks of that last one was we would rather pick.
So I saw this on Reddit not too long ago, and I thought it was a super cool idea. Granted, it's not about Modern, I'm sorry, Phil, but somebody had a banned deck Pauper battle box, which is very similar to the concept that we're describing, where they just find the best 75 from when a deck was banned, and that deck lives in that configuration and in their battle box. So their battle box was like 18 different decks. You could just pick up one up and play. And I just thought that was kind of a cool thing to do, and probably fairly cheap.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
I think I'm going to record a Pauper video next month.
Do it.
One of my listeners or viewers, whatever, was like, will you play Pauper if I donate? And I said, yes, I would. Absolutely.
Format's so great.
And it hasn't hit the PayPal yet, but like, I think it's incoming.
I'm actually a little bit worried that I'm uploading too much Pauper recently. Like, I'm going to have 3 Pauper videos this week.
You can't really have too much Pauper. Like, if you're having fun with it, that's... There is a market for it, and it appeals to legacy players too, because a lot of the cards are the same. And the thing that I love about Pauper that I say all the time is it's like Legacy without the bullshit, but you're still doing bullshit because you're Bryant Cook. Like, you're going to find whatever the fastest, most broken horseshit you're allowed to do is, and that hugely appeals to people.
Oh, speaking of being Bryant Cook, how many pop Storm decks did you have brewed up before they revealed that that was not actually going to be Legacy legal?
Oh, people sent me that card, and I just assumed it was a meme, so I'd never really invested time into it.
Got lucky.
Yeah, that was disappointing. If you're not on Twitter and didn't see this happen, there was this in the new unset that's coming out. Some of the cards will be Legacy legal, and some are just unset cards. And rather than silver border versus black border, they all have black borders, but the illegal ones have a little acorn holo stamp instead of the normal oval holo stamp. And they previewed a card. It was a 2-mana artifact it was like a balloon popper, like water carnival game was the theme. And whenever a player casts a spell, they move their pop counter up 1. And when a pop counter gets to 5, that player makes a 5/5 teddy bear, and both pop counters go back to 0. So it was just this like I read this thing and I was like, whoa, this is actually good. Like, this is like a completely reasonable alternate win con in some sort of Storm deck. And the internet went nuts, and it turned out that WotC in their preview had put the wrong holo stamp on it. Like, whoever mocked up the article, they just put an oval on it, and it's supposed to be an acorn. Like, Marrow had to walk it back like 3 hours later. It's like, no, that's not legal. But I'm kind of glad because that card looked kind of good.
I have noticed on their previews before that a bunch of them are photoshopped.
Oh, absolutely.
Specifically, one of the master sets. I was looking at it. I'm like, this Past in Flames is like definitely photoshopped, and people are like, no, it's just bad Twitter quality. I'm like, no, this Past in Flames is like a bad Photoshop. It's when they made it into the old face. Like, it's pretty clear that someone just used the magic wand in Photoshop and selected all the text. I was like, text does not get that badly pixelated. Sorry, I'm a graphic designer.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It's an early preview. I don't expect them to have high-res pictures of the actual cards yet. I don't think that set even comes out until next year.
Oh, wow.
Or...
Oh, I just assume it came out like next week. Just gotta have the product, man.
Well, to be fair, I mean, next week and next year are not far removed at this point of the year, but I'm pretty sure it was like a super early preview thing.
I know that Cyrus Corman Gill feels the same way I do on this one. I would really like it if Crowstorm was a real card. I don't even think that it's OP. I would just like to play one copy in my sideboard sometimes. And the fact that it's not a real card just like kind of bothers me a little bit. And it's not because I want the whole Stormcrow meme. I think that's stupid. I don't like it. But I think the card could just like maybe be playable.
Yeah. I recorded a real Legacy League of the Build Your Own Crowstorm. It was a 1,000-Year Storm High Tide deck that the primary win con was cast Stormcrow and then wish for that blue instant speed clone in your Cunning Wish board, and then cast that on your Stormcrow once you've 1,000-Year Stormed. And that is a posted video that I have. I ran it through 5 matches of Legacy, and I did not 0-5 that league.
I watched you do the thing. Like, I don't watch very many Magic videos, but when I heard you talking about that one, I'm like, okay, that gets, half an hour of my time. I'll watch him do the thing once. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I queued into D&T in the first round, so I obviously just got to assert myself. Like, you can just watch the first 20 minutes and you're going to see the combo. You don't have to finish the video. But you can play Crowstorm, you just have to put some work into it. Innovate. Empower yourself.
Gotta believe.
All right, so Bryant, give us your Magic Life updates and whatnot.
Sorry, mine are a little bit longer than usual. I'm sorry. The first one, 2 years of playing Wishclaw Talisman. I brainstormed it up 2 years ago, the night before Thanksgiving, stayed up way too late, and I made a video with Alex McKinley on it. It's about 30 minutes long. We talked through the entire process behind changing the Epic Storm into what it is today. I think it's a pretty good watch. Definitely go check that out. And I'm doing a YouTube giveaway. If you're a member of the Epic Storm YouTube channel this month, by December 23rd, you will be entered to win a Pioneer Lotus Combo Challenger deck. Absolutely free. You don't have to pay shipping. I'm going to cover all of that. Just holiday gifts to you. But on top of that, if you're a member this month, you get access to all videos and deck lists early. So a nice member perk for everyone. I also hit my 6K that I was going for. So thank you to everyone that subscribed. I do appreciate that. I was talking to Phil and Brian about this. And next year I'm going to go for 15. I don't think I'm actually going to hit it. But if I do, it'll feel twice as good, right? And
absolutely.
Exactly. And then I played in the Pauper PTQ after scrubbing out of one of the Eternal Weekends over the weekend. It felt so much fun. I know that like Affinity's destroying Pauper right now. It's just like by far the best deck, like even more oppressive than Delver is in Legacy. But I had a blast playing it, and I just barely missed top 8 due to some bad variants. But I love that format. If you're not playing Pauper, you should be. There's something for everyone. Definitely go check it out. You can build a deck for $15. It's just worthwhile.
I gotta pay attention to the Moto schedule more. Like, I literally don't even look at it. And I didn't know there was a Pauper PTQ until people were tweeting about playing in it. And I was like, damn, I love Pauper. And I think the Blue-Black Ninja deck is really good and totally my shit. I would have definitely played in that event if I knew it was happening.
Yeah. The Magic Online calendar and like event schedule and stuff is interesting to try and follow. It's easy to miss stuff.
It's difficult to grok, especially if you don't care about most of the things. Like, the effort threshold required for me to try to understand the calendar is higher than my interest in anything that might be on the calendar. Like, there's a small amount of like, oh shit, I missed a PTQ. But compared to, like, I don't play challenges, I don't play prelims. That's just not how I interact with Magic Online. I play leagues. And if I miss something once in a while, whatever.
I think part of the problem is it happens every Wednesday with their update, so they push everything, and then that week's events get added. So if you don't check every format, like starting Wednesday night or whatever, you just don't see events because they're not up for a full week. So like if you don't log on between Wednesday and Saturday, you just don't see events.
All right, shall we go ahead and get into the meat of the episode?
We're not going to talk about Legacy, right?
I mean, we're not going to talk about Legacy, but like we have to at least make some passing remarks, otherwise like people riot.
I actually want to talk about Legacy a little bit because I played the Buffalo Chicken Dip thing on the Saturday of Eternal Weekend, then I was home on Sunday to play the Moto actual Eternal Weekend. I played Elves in the Chicken Dip tournament. I hit some outrageous variance moments, and my tournament ended quickly, but it was like one of those tournaments where you know from the first game that you're not going to win that day. Where, like, in round 1, game 1, I had lethal on board against a 12-post opponent who had Glacial Chasm just slowly eating their life total. And while they were hiding behind the Glacial Chasm, they managed to Zenith for a Ramanap Excavator. And I was like, okay, that's not a big deal. The turn they sack their Chasm, I'll just rotate with Elvish Reclaimer into Bajuka Bog, and then they're dead that turn. And the turn they ran out of life points, I drew Bajuka Bog for my turn out of my like 47 card deck or whatever. And I literally like thought to myself, as long as I don't draw Bajuka Bog, and then I drew it, and I was just like, okay, it's one of those days. And just something like that happened every round. It was like, I need one more creature to make Craterhoof lethal, plus Grist, mill Craterhoof. And it was just like, ah! And so it was one of those, but the deck's obviously great. It won the online Eternal Weekend that was going on at the time that I was going 0-3 with Elves in paper. But the Sunday event, I woke up that morning, it was, Elves had just won the event the night before, and I was like, I want to play a blue deck. I'm not registering a deck without Brainstorm for 10 rounds, and I think Black's going to be good for this tournament. And I started cooking up Esper Shark still. Like, that's in my folder on Magic Online. It was ready. It was like pretty close to presentable. And then I saw Pokemoki had tweeted a Bant Splashing Black list, where the black cards were like some dope sideboard cards and Witherbloom Command, which it lined up pretty much card for card with Honorog's like 4-color control decks, like the Bant base with Splashing Red for Expressive Iteration. But Pokemoki replaced Expressive Iteration with Witherbloom Command in that card advantage 2-mana sorcery slot. And I was like, okay, yeah, this deck looks good. I messaged him about it. He said, yeah, it's good. Give me some tips. And I went on an 8-2 run with the deck. And I'm sure I didn't play perfectly because it was just, raw dogged, no testing. Here's this wild card in Witherbloom Command. I've never played that as the core of a control deck before. And I'm sure I didn't play perfectly, but like 8-2 was a respectable result. That deck felt really good. It lined up well against Elves, against Ragavan, against Dragon's Rage Channeler, like against Control. I really liked that experience playing that deck. And all 10 rounds are on YouTube now, if you want to go check that out.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about Elves a little bit. If we end up getting some legacy bans to kind of shake up the format like a lot of people want, I think Elves is very, very primed to be one of the better decks in the format. Like, unless a bunch of Plague Engineers come back to specifically combat it, like, Allosaurus Shepherd is very, very absurd. And you can run so many copies of that card between, like, it itself, Once Upon a Time to Find It, and Green Sun to tutor it.
I've even natural ordered for it. Like, that is sometimes the line. I recorded with Elves. That video is also up on YouTube, and at some point in the video, I was playing against some Ancient Tomb deck, and I was like, it's a good thing we don't have to worry about Chalice anymore. And someone made a comment of like, that's misleading. The Elves does care about Chalice. You only have the 4 Shepherd, and it's easy to kill. And it's like, what card in a Chalice deck kills Allosaurus Shepherd? Like, Stomp?
I was just about to say that.
Fiery Confluence? Like, you're going to spend 2 mana to answer a 1-drop. If you have it, the like blue Chalice decks can't answer it at all. And it only needs to be in play for 1 turn. Like, on turn 3, you go Shepherd, 1-drop, and now you're way ahead of the Chalice, and it doesn't matter anymore. Go ahead, spend 2 mana to kill it. Like, and between the Zeniths and the Once Upon a Times, you have way more than the 4 copies, and just Elves getting disrespectful to Chalice, which was one of its natural predators back in the day, and even the other combo matchups, like Sneak and Show, used to be just like the murderous natural predator to Elves, and because it had blue cards to back up its combo, and Elves didn't. But now the blue cards are blanks, and the Sneak and Show matchups fine to good, where it used to be terrible. I even just like 2-0'd Reanimator with Elves in the league I played. It's Hello Newton really tuned that deck, like used every flex slot to target combo, which was the only predator of Elves, because Elves has always outgrown blue decks. It's always overpowered non-blue decks, and like other combo decks was really the only thing that could beat it. And Newton just has a bunch of main deck slots plus the entire sideboard built to combat combo.
Well, I think one of the strengths of Elves is that it is one of the few decks in the format that just gets to outright disrespect Daze. And I've made it pretty clear my stance on Daze in this format, but I think that's one of the big benefits of playing Elves. And I was actually talking earlier today about a post-ban world and what it could mean. I think if Daze were to leave the format along with Ragavan, assuming that Wizards does what I would like them to do, but not really the point here. But if that was to happen, Elves does get the boost, but imagine everyone else getting that same boost of not having to play around Daze anymore. Like, so many decks would be better. And it's not just Elves getting this extra advantage. Like, imagine if everyone got to do that. It would just be such a great feeling. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're just going to make a really conservative ban of just Ragavan and hope that it's good enough, but that's an idea.
Right. I don't want to go very far down this rabbit hole, but I do just want to say, if you look at the data from Eternal Weekend only, Blue-Red Delver doesn't look super, super hot. Like, it put up some top 8 finishes, like, surprise, surprise. But as far as its overall win percentage, it was bad.
Well, we've had 4 months or more, like however long Modern Horizons 2 has been in print. Time doesn't mean anything anymore, but we've had that much time for everyone to put their crosshairs directly on Blue-Red Delver. And it won one of the events, right?
Yeah.
Like, it won the first one, and then put up top 8s consistently through the rest of them.
It won the third one too, right?
Oh yeah, you're right, it did. It won 2 of the 3, Jesus. Yeah, and that's with everyone knowing this is the S tier thing. You need to be able to beat it. And the other one was won by Elves, which is a deck that can afford to ignore Ragavan because you have enough creatures to trade off or big enough creatures to block, or you don't really care if they take your Wirewood Symbiote or whatever. You don't have Brainstorm that's going to really just pop off with a Ragavan hit. So it's obviously sick, but in our previous episode, or maybe the one before it, we were talking about like the conservative ban of like just clip Ragavan, let us get back to normal. And I offered the counter possibility that they're looking more whole cloth at like Ragavan, Daze, Expressive Iteration, Allosaur Shepherd, Thassa's Oracle. Like they might give us like a seismic shift. And I'm kind of rooting for that at this point. And for what it's worth, my thoughts on what should be banned have matured since we first started having this conversation. And if they ban one card out of Delver, I think it should be Expressive Iteration, not Ragavan. But obviously, like Ragavan's also a problem. But I think Expressive Iteration just being a dig through time that only some decks get access to is a problem.
Mine would be Murktide Regent, for the record.
That's like my 4th or 5th card in Delver I would target. Like, obviously it's a big fat jerk, but I think that exists in a spot that's kind of interesting. I don't like that it's blue. Like, I do agree that this card is pushed really, really hard. I used to... I top-8'd Eternal Weekend in Legacy with 2 Tombstalkers in my Grixis Delver deck when nobody else was really doing that. That was some Jarvis technology, because no one was ready for this, like, big fat idiot coming out of nowhere. But yeah, Murktide Regent, you don't need to be in black. You can do it anyway. Like, I agree that card's really good, but it's also like a mid to late game threat that dies to removal. I mean, like in Modern, it's a turn 2 play. In Legacy, like turn 3, turn 4, like it's going to show up. But I think that the Legacy card pool should be able to beat just like a large creature with stats. Like it's basically Tarmogoyf with flying that you have to do some more work to get, and like I think we should be able to beat that as a Legacy format.
But I don't think we get to beat that while also like having to answer Ragavan and having to answer like other early things. Like Ragavan is certainly part of the problem.
Yeah,
but...
Rag requiring the early Swords to Plowshares, or else it will just snowball. Like, I do think that the threats that only deal damage, the ones like DRC and Delver, where you can just like, all right, I'll take 6 to make sure I don't die to a Murktide Regent, versus Ragavan, where it's like, well, if I take 4 from this thing, they're going to be up 3 cards on me, and what I can't beat Murktide anyway. But I think that the problem in that equation is Ragavan, not Murktide Regent.
I'd like to circle back to a point that Phil made in the beginning of this discussion. Phil mentioned the 1% of Blue-Red Delver on the weekend. I think it's really, and I'm going to sound probably a little bit like a hypocrite here because the sample is so large. We have this huge sample size of all this data, and people are now comparing it to challenge data, which I think is a little bit of a flawed thing to do because you're comparing events that are 60 to 70 dedicated Legacy players to these pools of 300 to 400 players. And honestly, the turnout for these was a little bit low, but there are people that are just like, hey, I don't usually play Magic Online. They have God accounts. I'm going to sign up and play. There's a few people that joined our Discord and they're like, oh man, I joined. I went 06 with TES, but I had so much fun. Where those people aren't typically signing up for challenges. Those same people are the people signing up with Blue-Red Delver because it's the best deck in the format, and that weighs down the win percentage too. But you don't see it as much. Well, it's more difficult to see that when they're also winning the tournament, but you're like, oh, the win percentage was down. There's probably a bunch of people that just signed up with the best deck.
Yeah, I agree fully with that, and I think that's what happened there. But I also think like if there are people sitting around a round table with their coffee cups talking about bannings, they're gonna go like, oh, 50% this weekend, not so great, no changes.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily fair to Wizards of the Coast. Like, not that they deserve complete fairness in like the way, like I'm the eternal optimist, just wanting to give credit to. I know they are smart people who care about the game, and I know that their resources are probably stretched with the size of their team and the number of things they have to manage. And we know Legacy's not on the front burner, but I don't think anyone is like sitting around counting beans like, oh, 50% win percentage over Eternal Weekend. Format's fine. Like, I think that they read Twitter. They are in touch with like the actual pulse of a community before they start firing off ban decisions. Like normally, like it might take a little while to get there, but when the ban hits, it's usually a good one. Like we all knew Deathrite Shaman needed to get banned back in the day, and then like surprise Gataxian Probe was also hit with it, which like obviously that card's busted, but I hadn't heard that talked about in any of my conversations where like the format's warped, we need to hit Deathrite Shaman. That's what I was hearing. And they had the foresight to also be like, this card's also busted because they thought about it in a bigger picture. And I think that the Allosaur Shepherd Thassa's Oracle, deeper list is on the table for that reason.
At the time, Probe was actually a pretty big talking point on Reddit. I don't know if it was on Twitter. I wasn't active on Twitter at the time. But on Reddit, a lot of people wanted Probe gone. And in the previous BNR update, they mentioned how Probe was on the watch list. And I was like, oh, hot damn, I better buy Japanese Soil Thoughtseizes. And I did that, and I got them all before the Probe banning happened.
Smart. Stonks.
All right. Why don't we take this moment to move past
we've
Legacy?
said enough.
I think that's
we promised no Legacy.
More than we were planning on.
Did some Legacy.
Boo.
We lied to you.
So let's
One
dive
quick thing.
into... All right.
If you want to
Fine.
watch a terrible Legacy format, since Brian plugged his video, you can also watch my video on my channel. I also went X and 2, but my tiebreakers did not hold, and I fell down to like 19th or something.
No, just go watch my Painter video and watch me fuck around with Oswald Fiddlebender.
Yeah,
It's way
bend some
better.
fiddles with Phil.
Damn.
All right. So let's kind of talk about our vintage Eternal Weekend data. Why don't we go ahead and start with the Mox Emerald event from the 27th?
Oh, wow. The first place list look really fucking good. I would definitely recommend playing that deck.
Oh, what makes you say that, Bryant?
Well, I worked on it a little bit. Like, I played a lot of Vintage for like 2.5 weeks leading up to Eternal Weekend. And at first, I was playing these really large blue Tinker decks. Esper Tinker with like 2 Teferis and 2 Lavinias because they beat the Flusterstorm mirrors. But it was just really apparent that they were super clunky. Prismatic Ending didn't align versus all the Ragavans that were in the format. I'm like, I have to cut white. So, like a lot of people, I went to the big blue Tinker decks that were just like 4 Hull Breachers plus like Time Twister and Wheel of Fortune. But I'm sure Brian, as a vintage champion, can confirm with me right now, the Twisters have not aged well, at least in my opinion.
They have not. I played one league with the Power 9s, Hull Breacher, Tinker deck. Power 9, awesome person, powerful wizard, by the way. Always on the cutting edge. I think that the list that I pulled that he had done well with a week or two before I recorded did not quite keep up with where the format was when I got around to playing it. And I think in the league, I got to like Breacher Twister someone once. And then once I cast Twister without a Breacher and just fucking died. And another time I got Breacher Twistered and then won. Like I was just hellbent and my opponent had a fresh 7 and a pile of treasures. And I just won that game anyway. So like that, it's a powerful thing. Twister sucks without Breacher. And like you do play them in the right numbers. Like it's 4 and 1. You only get 1 time Twister, but I think the deck would only want 1 even if you could play 4. And it has Narset, so it's like 5 and 1. You're likely to be set up when you draw your Twister, but if you ever don't have it, I hope you pitch it to Force, because that's not a card you could just cast straight up in a fair deck. And yeah, that Time Twister is just it's funny because I recently posted a picture of my friend Chris bought into Power at GP New Jersey, whenever that was. It was like 4 years.
2014.
2014? Was it that long ago? Okay. And there's this picture that I comes in my Facebook memories every year of like Chris holding up his Power 9 and like all of our friends just like with our arms up like like celebrating in the background, and I love that picture. And in the picture he has all of the power except for Time Twister, and he has a library instead because that's what you needed at the time. And because of Commander, Time Twister is the second most expensive Magic card. Like if you rule out like alternate printings or like Summer Magic or whatever, like it's Black Lotus and then Time Twister are the 2 most expensive Magic cards that exist. And it just wasn't even on his to-do list. It was the cheapest one. It probably would have been almost a throw-in in a deal of that size, and just didn't bother with it. And the Commander interest in Time Twister versus the vintage playability of Time Twister is like a funny dichotomy to see playing out over time.
So, to circle back to Hullbreacher plus Twisters, I saw that Matthew Vuk, Ozymandias himself, played a list to a like top 16 in a challenge where it was 4 colors, but instead of the Twisters added in Dak fade-ins, and I was like, well, that's an idea, Matt. Let me try
Ooh.
this. So I tried it, and I was like, okay, well, this wasn't terrible, but now I'm playing like 7 3-drops in my deck, and my deck, it just was really clunky. And I was like, okay, well, what if we change some of the numbers? What if we do like a 2-2 split with Dak and Hullbreacher and try Narset? And I never found the right thing. So I ended up going to like Dress Down Pio, which was really low to the ground and felt really good. But I kept on losing to even larger blue decks, like just like Jeskai Control, Bant Control. It was just like anything that was a real control deck I couldn't beat. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to be on that for Eternal Weekend if I'm just going to lose because I don't have Saga in my deck. So I went back to like the stock Saga PO decks, and once again, those were just terrible. I played a lot of Vintage, by the way. And I then got to just like Grixis Thieves, which is a list I posted, which had Ragavan, Hullbreacher, and Dak Faden without any of the combo cards outside of like Tinker or Citadel. And that deck was pretty close. But then I had this realization of Underworld Breach beats pretty much everything in Vintage right now in the fair matchups. Like, it beats Fluster and it beats Pyro. Your opponent has Force, and that's pretty much it. And you have all of those cards that I just mentioned to fight against Force. So Underworld Breach was just this powerhouse. And I was like, okay, well, what if we're just Tinker Breach? And that's our deck. And I started testing it. And I had some of those 3-drops in the deck. And over a few leagues, I went from like 6 3-drops all the way down to like 2. And I just added in a bunch of preordains, and all of a sudden the deck just like worked really, really well because you weren't playing like a bunch of 2-card Monty things anymore. You weren't playing Key Vault. You still had those cards in your deck, but you weren't just like randomly drawing one of them, or you weren't just randomly drawing your Tinker targets all the time, or you wouldn't have Brain Freeze with no Underworld Breach. Like, your deck was just a coherent plan all the time. So I came up with this list, and I shared it with Alex McKinley, who won the first Eternal Weekend. And Alex, before the first one, actually showed the deck to Brian. We're all in a big group chat, and a bunch of our other friends also had the list, but there was a few of us playing that 75 in all 3 events.
Yeah, I also went 7-2 in this event. I landed in 20th with the Stone Worst Breakers of all the X2s. I took my losses earlier. I think I was like 1-2 and then ground out 5 in a row, or 6 in a row, however math works. So I was out early, but I kept playing, and the deck was really powerful. That video is also posted, like all 9 rounds. I did record those, and going back, like Bryant said, I got the list in a group text or a group chat like 3 hours before the event, and I was planning on napping for those 3 hours. So I literally like, Alex shipped me the list. I watched him finish a league. He had like 2 matches left in a league. He streamed it on Discord, and like Bryant popped in for a second, and like we just, talked. I watched a couple matches, and I was like, okay, I'm good, and went and took a nap. And then I did not play optimally the first 3 rounds, which were the ones where my losses came. And then I was like, okay, now I get it, and just won the rest of them. And meanwhile, Alex was winning the tournament. So the deck was really powerful, and I played it in day 2 as well. Really smart choices, really well-constructed deck, Bryant.
Thank you. I played it in the 3rd event, and in that event, I lost early to Dredge. It was just like 2 hands that looked like keeps, and then my opponent played Bazaar, even though game 2 I had like a bunch of hate. Dredge just dredged me, and that's what happens sometimes. This video is up on YouTube as well, but then the last round I got paired versus LSV. And knowing that it was Luis Scott Vargas, I probably should have assumed that there was some sort of combo in the deck. But I had already faced Is It Tempo 5 times in that event out of, was it 9 rounds, Brian, or 10? I can't remember.
It was 9.
9. So I had already faced it 5 times out of those 8 rounds. So I was like, okay, LSV led on Ragavan. He's also on the Is It Tempo deck. I put Sphinx of the Steel Wind into play, and LSV was like, yeah, whatever, breach you, kill you. And I was like, I feel really dumb right now, where I could have gotten Citadel and maybe have won. But like, I was so into the everyone has been playing Is It Tempo all day mindset.
Yep, I mean, that happens sometimes. You mentioned Dredge. So last episode, I had kind of mentioned that I thought some of the graveyard decks were in a worse position than last year. And in this specific event, it was Dredge's heyday. Cyrus Corman Gill put Dredge into the top 8 of this event. There were 4 Dredge decks in the top 32, and the Bazaar decks had the highest win percentage of the event by quite a bit, at nearly 60% in this event for Dredge, which is extremely high, and 58% more generally for just like the Bazaar archetypes all lumped together. That event was a good event to be dredging in.
I believe Sullivan Brophy is one of these Dredge top 8s. I think I saw him post that on Facebook. I don't know what his Moto username is, but he's probably the best Dredge player on Earth. So there's a lot of power behind the Dredge top 8s as well, in addition to the deck being well positioned. I've played against Sullivan. He's from the Pennsylvania area. Like, we overlap in our vintage communities, and I've seen him wiggle out of some shit that I thought I had locked up, where I just have like Tormod Script and Leyline of the Void, and just like, oh, LOL, we win now, and then I just lose somehow and don't understand what happened. Cyrus also incredibly powerful wizard in general. So a lot of really powerful names played this powerful deck in this open meta, and were rewarded for it. What's not really showing up quite as much are the non-Dredge Bazaar decks that just were everywhere last year. The Hogak, the Hollowvine, the Squee decks. They're present. They put up top 8s. They are represented in the spread. But last year it was like most of the rounds. It was like nearly 50-50. You were to play against some Hollowvine Bazaar deck, which was just not the case this year.
I barely faced any Mishra's Workshop decks in any of the events I played. Like, it was just not a popular deck. And in testing for these events, if you played leagues, which is what I did in order to test, the week before, or maybe it was 2 weeks before the event, green-white Hate Bears with that new flip Quasali Pride Mage in it, was everywhere in the... Like, I played a league where I faced 4 of that deck, and then the 5th match was Bant Hate Bears. Like, the leagues were just covered. And I was like, is this what Eternal Weekend's going to look like?
It won a challenge, and then literally the next day I put out a video on that, because I had been sent the deck list ahead of time by the person who won the event. They wanted me to help test it and whatnot. So I think that 1-2 punch temporarily really boosted that deck's numbers a lot.
Okay, that's fair. But it was everywhere, and I was like, oh wow, I need to really prepare for this deck for Eternal Weekend. So when you look at the sideboard, there was 2 Abrade and 2 Bolt in it. And I was like, well, I need 4 removal spells for all these Hate Bears. And I don't know about you, Brian, but I never faced any of the Hate Bear decks once I got into the Eternal Weekend events.
Well, Brian made the mistake of playing one of those decks, right?
Yeah, I did. In the third day, after the first 2 days of information came out, Breach in its various forms was heavily represented and overperforming for its representation. Both your Tinker Breach Saga amalgamation, and then other people were on more traditional, just like Xerox decks with Breach in them. I also saw all 3 smushed together. I believe Maxtortion had like a Ragavan Tinker Saga Breach deck that he went 6-3 with in the first event and tweeted it out, so people were aware of it. And so I decided to just be like a hateful individual on day 3 and played the deck with 3 main deck Collector, 4 main deck Archon of Emeria, 2 Lavinia, 2 Endurance, 2 Force of Vigor. I was like, I'm just not losing to a Breach deck today. And I queued into Bug, Jeskai, Shops. Just like none of the decks. I smushed the Breach deck I got paired into. Like I was right on that meta call. But I definitely, if I had played a single league with this Bant Emeria deck, Bant Archon deck before I queued up for it, I would not have selected it. Because in my head, I was like, this is just structurally the Bug deck with white cards instead of black cards. And the white cards seem to line up better. But the bug deck has like Demonic Tutor and like some other access to some other things that smooth you out. Like Deathrite Shaman is just a reliable threat as well as a mana provider, or Noble Hierarch is just one of those two things. And there's a few subtle differences between Bant and Bug that make Bug a more defensible vintage deck, though I still think that deck is not great. And like compared to Rug, like Rug Xerox, like a true Xerox deck like Rug or Jeskai, the difference is 4 Preordain, which I didn't really connect all those dots in my head. Bryant just mentioned Preordain being the missing piece to the Grixis deck, and all of the experience with Xerox in the past, being able to smooth out your draws, have the right thing, have some spell velocity, being able to support Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time, like that's just a totally different calculation than I have Brainstorm, Ponder, Ancestral Recall, Gitaxian Probe, and creatures. That, and like your opening hand is what you get, basically. You're living off the top, and the creatures better be good. And that deck just, it is not a good call for a big event like that. I got tricked, and basically by got tricked, I mean I didn't test properly. And I think the meta read was dope at the winners metagame, but you have to get into the winners metagame, and by losing round 1 to just a different deck is what it is.
So, shame on you for playing Collector Oof, but our fans will love to hear this. So when you face the bug deck is the most fair thing you can do in Vintage. I talked about it last week, but it's a lot like 2012 Shardless Bug. It's just like a grind you to the death bug deck. I got turn 1 to buy it twice in the second Eternal Weekend. Like, I had just watched Alex McKinley win a painting with my 75 cards, and I was like, hell yeah, let's go. Start the second one. I just had an energy drink. It's like 3:30 in the morning. Feeling good. Well, my opponent in back-to-back games had turn 1 Collector Roof backed by Force of Will, and I was like, fuck this, I'm going to bed. That was round 2, but I was just like, I can't believe that I got turn 1 by Bug in 2 games.
Yeah, the deck doesn't have very many broken draws. That deck is built on stability rather than a velocity or brokenness, but there is one Black Lotus in the deck, and sometimes they have it. And here's like double Collector Roof or some bullshit. And they do have those draws. I was trying to have those draws on the Sunday, and that video is also up. It'll be up tomorrow when we're recording this, so it's up already by the time you're hearing this. You will see me have multiple turn 1 Collector Roofs backed by Force of Will, and then my opponent goes Volcanic Island Ragavan instead of, anything that's broken. The Ragavan tempo decks that suck, by the way, they performed extremely poorly. Their win rates are really bad across the 3 events. Don't be fooled into playing a legacy deck in Vintage, but Ragavan is a serious problem for someone who's trying to win the game with a grizzly bear, just coast to coast, and it didn't work. And that second event, I think you and I were like grumpy and in bed around the same time. First of all, that was the one that I didn't record. I recorded the first and third one, but the second one started at 5 a.m. East Coast time after we had started 9 rounds at 8 p.m. the night before.
It was 5 a.m., so it was probably like 6 a.m. when I was grumpy, not 3:30.
Yeah, it started at 5. I think I went to bed from the first one around 3:30. Didn't fall asleep right away because I was wired from playing a Magic tournament, going 7-2, having a pretty good run. And then, like, probably 40 minutes of sleep, I'm up and ready for the next one. I jumped into Discord just for a second, long enough to watch Alex win the painting. I was like, yeah, dope. And then just, like, queued back in with the same deck. I was like, yeah, that's the confidence boost I need. And then, not recording was weird. I have not played Magic Online that I wasn't recording in probably a year and a half. Like, I can't even say like a cube draft or something. I used to queue up cube drafts off camera, but I don't even do that anymore. My Moto time is content time, period.
And yeah, that change is so weird. Like, I used to play so many Death and Taxes leagues for like pleasure in the evening and stuff. And now like I legitimately can't think of the last time I played a Moto league for pleasure that I didn't record. It's just like, if I am playing Magic, it is making me money via content. Like,
yeah, you play way more Magic than we do, or at least on your own time. I noticed a couple things when I wasn't recording. Like, one, I felt like I was forgetting something. Like, I didn't have my recorder running. It wasn't in the background. I didn't have to manage anything. My mic was just like pushed off to the side. Just none of that was in place. I felt like something was missing. And I think that distracted me a little. Like, we always say that content creation is harder than playing for yourself because you have to worry about all these other things. But it was like, I don't know. I think what I'm saying is clear, even though I'm not saying good words right now. Like, something was missing, which threw my groove off, even though it should technically be a hindrance. I was like confused about, it felt like something was wrong. Like, that was part of it. And another part of it was like my losses. I was mad. When I'm on camera, I'm just like, oh, whatever. A good game, opponent. Like, they really had our number there. Part of it is like nobody wants to hear you tilt off on camera, and part of it is I'm making content, so this is productive, even though I'm losing. And in like a real tournament with real stakes, sitting at home, like I was mad. Like I didn't like salt off in the chat or anything. I wasn't mad at my opponent. It was just like, fuck. Like, of course I would draw the 6th land or whatever. Like, just like alone in my room rather than it just felt like a loss was a waste of my time rather than a loss was, learning opportunity, content creation. I have slid somehow much farther onto the content creator side of the player spectrum than the tournament grinder at this point.
And the content creator position is lucrative. When you have it good, you don't have to sweat whether or not you've paid for your weekend by min caching or whatever.
Yeah. Like the $25 entry fee, the 2 leagues I record, or the 2 rounds I recorded will like easily make $25 in ad revenue or whatever, like generate a new Patreon. Like, I don't know, like I'll get that money back. And it's not even about $25. It was just like weird to me how irrelevant the entry cost was and like ultimately how low the stakes are. But I was like, wow, like in person, I don't get like that. When I'm recording, I don't get like that, but like also it was like 5 in the fucking morning. Like that was I'm gonna hope that some amount of my disgruntledness was the fact that I had not slept, really. Like I'm gonna give myself some credit and just be like, yeah, you didn't sleep and you played 4 rounds and now it's like 9 a.m. and like the sun's up and you're just like, fuck this, I hate my life. So
okay, so I specifically want to talk about like how hard the Time Twister event physically was on some people. So I have the top 32 results up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 no-show pairings happened with these top 32 players. And a lot of these happened in round 9. Like two of these people who are live for decent prizes, like their opponents just straight up were like, I can't take it anymore, or I literally fell asleep at the keyboard. I saw a couple of those posts floating around Twitter. Or like there's 3 people who had their round 1 opponent no show, potentially because like they signed up for the event and like had their moto open and then overslept or something. Like that was very real for this event in a way that is not normally true for a Magic Online tournament.
Yeah, in I think it was round 2 of the second event, I was paired against 8cast and I won game 1, they won game 2, and then like sideboarding went the full 3 minutes, and then like 6 minutes into game 3, my opponent hadn't like kept a hand yet or mulliganed, and I was like, what just happened? And then they showed up in the chat and they were like, oh, oops, sorry, I thought that was game 3, I walked away. Which I don't think would happen if it wasn't 6 a.m.,
Yeah.
But like part of my brain was, of course, like, oh, you couldn't wait another 3 minutes to remember. But the other part was like, okay, we get to play. And then they stomped me easily.
I don't know if you two will remember this, but around a decade ago, Star City had this player point thing where you can, I guess it was before the Players' Championship. It was the series before that. And they would allow people to sign up online for their events. And then there just wouldn't be like a player check before round 1 or whatever. So like I'm playing Blue-White Delver in Standard. I'd show up for my round number 1 and I wouldn't have an opponent at Star City Opens. And at the time I didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't even go to a lot of them. But it happened to me at least 2 or 3 times where I just show up and it'd be like, oh, your opponent's not actually at the venue. They just signed up for the player point. And it reminded me a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's still a little bit of that happens like when you get into the real scrap of the leaderboard. I know it's been 2 years at this point since this has come up, but I know a lot of the SCG grinders, they like beseech each other like, come on, gentlemen's agreement that we don't play an IQ on the week off, because just like every point matters, and if there's not an open that week, someone's running an invitational qualifier somewhere in the country that you can get like 4 points for winning or something, and it gets kind of grindy and toxic. And I believe that, I don't know if they've shut it down since then, but I know at some point people were just like buying entry to all 3 Sunday challenges, and they might still be in like day 2 of the main event, where it's just like $40 for 1 SCG point or whatever, x3, which seems like the bad way to do it. But if that's your goal, I don't know. I don't have that grind in me.
Why do you think so many Brad Nelson caliber players showed up to play in the Roanoke locals? It wasn't just because they happened to live in town. It's because like those were IQs and those points were real to them.
Absolutely.
I have so many top 8 or top 4 finishes, like where some of these people are in there, and the conversation goes like, would you like to split? Yes, let's split. And then I would just like concede. The points didn't matter to me, the points mattered to them.
One of my biggest regrets in my Magic career, I made the finals of a modern classic. I actually beat Bryant in top 8 of that event. It was during, I'm not rubbing it in your face, I'm just saying he was there too. We've been in more than one classic top 8 together, but it was during Eldrazi winter. I was the only person in that tournament who apparently knew about Eldrazi cards. Like, Bryant was on Burn or something. My finals opponent was on like Grandfather Jund with just like Thoughtseize Tarmogoyf Jund, and I was like, well, I'm gonna win, but are the points worth anything to you? And they were like, yes, they are. And I was like, okay, I will collect 75% of the SCG store credit or whatever, and you get the points. And they agreed to that. But in retrospect, now that I'm at a point in my life where trophies are worth more than money to me, I wish I had that modern plaque on my wall with the legacy plaques that I've also collected. Like, having a modern one would be nice. But at the time, I think I bought like an FBB Bayou and Tropical Island with that store credit from that event. So
yeah, that's aged well.
Yeah, it's aged well. I'm not going to complain. But yeah, definitely being in those positions. I had the opposite one in another one where like Star City points did matter to me. It was the season after I won the Envy, and I was carrying some number of buys, and I was in the running for the next season championship or whatever briefly. And in the finals of a classic, I was like, yeah, I need the points. And I gave up some equity to get the points. So that was quite a side tangent.
To circle back to being exhausted, I want to come back to this. I'm sorry, Phil. I have something I want to share.
But the hate bears.
So Brian talked about being like super exhausted. My wife woke me up at 10:30 Saturday after I went to bed at maybe 6:30 in the morning. So I had a solid 3.5 hours of sleep. I'm like, oh, there's a Pauper PTQ today. I should play in that. And it just like didn't really dawn on me how tired I was. And I'm winning game 3. My opponent has Relic in play. I have a hard cast, Horror of the Broken Lands, if you know what that is. It's a 4/4 that when you cycle, it gets +2/+1. My opponent blocks with a 1/1. And I'm like, okay. We go to their end step, and then they cast Scred on my Horror. I'm like, oh, I just have to cycle 1 creature so this lives. I beat myself up for like 4 rounds over that misplay. And it was only because I was exhausted from not getting any sleep. Like, I'm like confident that if I was actually awake, that wouldn't have happened. But in that recording, I'm just like so hard on myself. And Brian's anger thing made me think of it, because like the entire time for the next 4 rounds, I'm just super pissed off at myself, going like, I'm better than that. I shouldn't be doing that. I'm so bad at Magic. Like, I'm trying to like keep a solid face for the camera, but I was just fuming inside.
I have a similar story to that. This one was from a paper event. It was from that modern event that I played recently. I was paired against a friend. It was our win and in for top 8, or it might have been top 8. I don't know. It was a match with stakes, and I was on Zoomer Jund, and he was on Hammer Time, and he attacked with a Pure Steel Paladin that was holding a Colossus Hammer. I chump block with Ragavan, and he goes, second main, I'll move the hammer over. Like, he says the word over and like trails off, picks up the hammer, like it's physically in his hand, and he's looking at all his other creatures. And I say, that's dead. It has 2 damage on it. And he's like, I'm not going to move the hammer, and just put it back down. And like, he technically hadn't announced like the target yet to like actually change it. And in that moment, I was like at like 9 out of 10 mad at him and 10 out of 10 mad at myself. Because it was just like, he's right, but also he's being a fucker about it. Like, what's a little sportsmanship between friends here? Like, you know what you did. I ended up just beating him anyway, but I definitely got some daggers in. I'm like, wow, imagine scumming your friend and losing anyway. You must feel good about yourself. And there was a little bit of tension in that moment, but definitely madder at myself than at him for that.
All right, I guess we could talk about Vintage Magic, Phil.
Oddly, the Hate Bears decks, I guess I should say, had really good showings in this second event. So there is a mono white Luris deck that got third in the event. There is another black white Hate Bears deck that got sixth. And then there is one more like Death and Taxes Hate Bears style deck in 26th place or 25th place as well. The Hate Bears deck is a deck that doesn't, like, air quotes, vintage quite as hard as many other vintage decks, but just kind of something about the way this event lined up, and maybe the success of like Breach previously or something like that led some people to choose it for this event, and it worked out well for them.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I didn't know what mono white aggro was or black white aggro were off of Justin's spreadsheets. Did we credit Justin yet? Justin Ganare, I am actually level 1. We're working off all of his data, his spreadsheets that he posts. If we didn't shout him out, like, go follow him and support his Twitch channel and shit. Really excellent member of the vintage community. Anyway, I looked at Justin's spreadsheets and I was like, what the fuck is mono white aggro? What's black white aggro? Can I play those? And
Could you find the deck lists for this event? Because I was trying to a minute ago, and I found the deck lists for the other two events, but not this one on MTG Top 8.
I have not looked for any actual deck lists.
Okay.
I figured they wouldn't be posted in the time that they needed to be for me to figure out what mono white aggro is for the third event, and I haven't looked back since then.
Yeah, I'm just assuming it is Hate Bears with Luminarch Aspirant. Like, without looking at it, that's just my guess as to what that is.
Yeah, makes sense. You're definitely more in tune with that side of vintage Magic than I am. But yeah, I was pretty excited when I saw that those things did well in the second event, which also helped lean on my decision to be like a Hate Bear in the third event.
Phil, you'd be happy to know that Luminarch Aspirant is blowing up Pioneer right now. Ever since Thalia has been introduced to the format, there's various mono-white aggro decks, including Winota, that are all playing Luminarch Aspirant. Well, Winona's not playing that one, but Winona is also a Thalia deck. I'm derailing. I'll shut up now.
No, it's fine. Like, I've been singing that card's fucking praises for, is it years at this point? How long has this shit been going on?
Whenever it was printed.
Might be a week or two. When did that card come out? Time? I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? It's all made up.
It is one of the best ways as a Hate Bears deck to grow your creatures out of range of specific threats, like, say, Plague Engineer or Lightning Bolt. An Archon with 1/1/1/1 counter on it is bullshit if you are the Lightning Bolt deck.
It's True Name Nemesis. It's unbeatable. Like, you can't remove that thing if it's a 3/4.
Yeah. And so it also solves problems in creature mirrors where it's like, oh, they have a hollow one. Shit. My deck is full of X1s and 2/2s. Oh, now I just have to wait 2 turns, and now my Thalia first strikes and beats hollow one. It solves so many problems.
Awesome card. I'm glad it got third place at Eternal Weekend. I'm glad it didn't win, but I'm glad it put up a really respectable result.
All right. I don't really have anything else to say notably about this second event. Do either of you?
I do. Discover N is a vintage player that the vintage community props up as like the greatest player on the planet. I don't think anyone actually knows who Discover N is. I like to pretend that they're just like a high school math teacher with a really bad sense of humor. But they top-8'd both events with Doomsday. I don't believe they top-8'd the third. I didn't actually check.
Negative.
But people were going wild that Discover N had top-8'd back-to-back and coming for Brian's crown of most Eternal Weekend top-8s. So just need to make Brian aware that somebody's coming for the throne.
Yeah, Marshall Arthurs, he messaged me after the third event, and he was like, how you doing? And I was like, yeah, I'm already dead, just sort of playing for content. And he was like, We need to get paper events back so you can win by judge ruling some more. and I doubled down. I was like, yeah, judge rulings and the natural gatekeeping of owning power are really the only things that prop me up in this community.
Whew.
I'm comfortable making that joke because I do have an online top 8, so I can say that I can actually win in an open field, and it's not just I'm one of the better players who happens to own $20,000 of power or whatever the fuck it costs
More
these
than
days.
that.
Though that is a very real field limiter.
$20,000 is barely, or it's like just over the Lotus nowadays.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I don't know.
But Doomsday on the Weekend did not have a great showing outside of Discoveron. Kai Sawatari had a top 16, but Doomsday is one of those decks where 6 months ago, people are like, are we actually going to have to ban Thassa's Oracle? And now, Dress Down has changed the game quite a bit, plus some of the other decks coming back. It shows you how weird, the cylindrical nature of Magic can be.
Ragavan, too. That was not a player in Vintage for a long time, and being able to sort of snipe a Doomsday pile or threaten a dash where they have to like play around it a little bit or whatever. Having more creatures, and especially one that can interact with a Doomsday pile, all matters.
It's also sometimes what you see is a little bit different in Vintage. They always play 2 copies of Thassa's Oracle. Where in Legacy, they're just like, no, I'll just never pitch it to Force. Where in Vintage, people are just embrace the fact that they're going to have to do it at some point. So just a little bit of a difference in deck building philosophy. And Vintage, at first, they were just like, obviously, we're going to play 4 Street Wraith. It took the Legacy Doomsday players a long time to get to 4 Street Wraith. For a while, it was just 2, and then maybe 3, and then 4, and then hey, maybe we should play Edge of Autumn.
Yep. I looked at Doomsday's meta share and win rate from recent challenge data, because I considered, like, do I fire a bullet on Doomsday? I have a non-zero number of reps with the deck, and it's powerful. And I remember it being just a terror last year, and it's just not. It's off the radar. The win rates were low, and it's not a big part of the metagame anymore, but obviously still powerful.
Speaking of powerful, in the Mox Ruby event, guess what did well again? It was Dredge.
Breach.
Oh, well, that too.
Also Dredge. Well, Breach won the tournament, scoreboard Dredge, but yeah, Dredge is present.
Yeah, so we see a Dredge at 8th, a Dredge at 9th, a Dredge at 10th, another one at 24th. Oh, shit, I skipped the one at 13th. Good event to be the Bazaar deck once again.
Well, I think part of it's just, it's really good at preying upon the Tinker decks. Like, even though your deck has Cage and Soul Guy Lantern or whatever, and Needles, the Bazaar deck is just made to beat you. They have 12 pitch counters, they have Force of Vigors, they're going to have the advantage. That, and one thing that happened last year was that they were just flat out dead to a Sphinx of the Steel Wind, and now they're all playing Bridge from Below, so they just beat Sphinx.
Yeah, I had the year that I went to Paris for Eternal Weekend, Dredge was my win-in into top 8, and I had I was on the draw for game 3, and I had like a really early Tinker that got Citadel and stuff, and Andrea Mangucci was standing behind me, and he was like, you didn't think that Blightsteel Colossus would win that game? And I was like, that wasn't even in my deck. On the draw against Dredge, Blightsteel's not going to win, even if you turn one that Tinker. Like, you need to combo them, because they are built to just go wide and smash, and they chump with a zombie, go to 9 poison, and kill you on the crackback. Like, that's just not a play that's going to work. And like, Sphinx isn't good enough. They can Force a Vigor your Citadel. They can also pressure your life total, so you might not even have life for Citadel. Some builds have Creeping Chill in them, some don't, but just being able to, your opponent starts the game at 8 life and you're at 34 or 32, like that's a significant thing to just happen for free.
So interestingly, it takes until this event for shops to put up a top 8 finish, and when it did, it was actually Nettle Cyst shops. So
Nice.
This was a card that I tested in Vintage, not the week after it came out, but like the following week, because I had played a couple of like Legacy and Modern leagues with that card, and it was just stupid. So I went like, why not Vintage? And it was just okay. Shops is already kind of tight, at least the aggro shops build is, and sometimes you end up like playing a Thorn and locking yourself out from actually casting a Nettle Cyst in a very awkward way. So I kind of like dropped those in the shops builds that I was playing, but glad somebody else got it to work.
Yeah, Nettle Cyst also is a major non-bow with Arcbound Ravager. Like, you don't get to move pieces around because the Nettle Cyst shrinks as the Ravager grows, and in a local, the one paper vintage event I've played this year, I was paired against aggro shops, and she had 2 Nettle Cysts and a Ravager. So Ravager was just full negative to activate. And like there wasn't even like an alpha strike where I make the best blocks I can and then they pile everything onto one, because it's just a serious non-bow in that situation.
So I had a question for you too, and maybe I'm the only one that does this, but when I list my opponent's decks in my descriptions for YouTube, I like being as accurate as possible. And I only faced shops once on the weekend. I had a long match against them. I never saw Golos, and they certainly weren't playing aggro or Ravager or Nettlecyst shops. It was just like, I am a deck with artifact prison cards. So I called it like Goldfish calls it, with prison shops, and it just felt so wrong calling it that. I'm like, it's like calling like Blue Sky. Like, I don't know, like it just feels weird. Like
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's some indicators like Crucible of Worlds usually indicates that Golos is in the deck somewhere. Chromatic Lantern indicates that they're on some sort of colored build. Like, I played against a shops deck in a league that had turn 1 Mishra's Workshop, Chromatic Lantern, and then tinkered me into Sphinx of the Steelwind at some point in the game. And I know that like combo shops is a differentiated list on Goldfish. Like combo, prison, and aggro are their 3 shops differentiations. But they could have just been on like 2010 bunch of spheres shops. I don't know.
That's what it seemed like. They did have Crucible, like all the like taxing things, no rod, but they never played a Golos in like 3 games, and our games went long. Maybe they just never drew it.
Yeah, Null Rod and Crucible indicate that Golos was probably in there somewhere, but maybe not. Maybe they just don't know about Golos. Maybe they haven't played Vintage in 2 years and just really wanted to play Eternal Weekend.
As far as
I don't know.
my content goes, I have moved to just labeling them match 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because so many decks right now in multiple formats are mush, where sometimes you finish a game and you don't actually know which of the decks your opponent was playing against. Like, you know, you saw 10 of their cards. If you beat them quickly playing a combo deck, like, do you know, oh, are you blue-red Delver? Are you blue-red Delverless Delver? Are you blue-red Ragavan Saga? Or not Saga, Standstill. Like, there's so many overlapping decks that I've just kind of stopped doing the deck names.
But you're missing out on that sweet engagement where people tell you how wrong you are.
I have only ever done the named each opponent's deck round by round in these 3 Eternal Weekend videos, the Legacy one and the 2 Vintage ones I released. Because, like, I feel like that's kind of a try-hard thing, where normally, like, I really try to gear my content and my engagement with my community in the direction of learning, and there's something to learn in every match. It does, like, I don't really want people skimming through my chapters to find, like, a 2-0 versus Delver. Like, I don't want people doing that. So generally I just do round 1 through 5. But for these real events where I was actually representing an archetype over a larger sample size, I did tag the...
Yeah, I also did get tired of me spending literally 3 seconds to pick a deck name. Like, click, click, click. Okay, this is Blue-Red Delver. And then it's like, no, it's not Blue-Red Delver. It's thing that is 5 cards different from Blue-Red Delver. Like, okay.
It's Ice Station Zebra, Phil.
I will say I did a quasi-intentional algorithm hack on these vintage videos. As normally I record 5 rounds, and my videos have, we mentioned it last week, I have that like mid-league bumper that's just like, hey, thanks for watching, you're still here, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget my links. Now back to the league. And it's like just that fast. My actual words I say are, we're about halfway through the video. And that's how I lead into it. And I usually drop that about halfway through the video, like between round 2 and 3, which in a league is about halfway through the video. But when you release 10 rounds, I'm not going to reshoot my bumper. Like that's like 30 minutes of work to just drop it. So I dropped it after like round 3 and after round 6, neither of which are halfway through the video. And I figured, you know, most people with brains would just be like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. Like whatever, or ignore it or whatever. The amount of comments I got when I dropped the Legacy video was like, we're not halfway through the video. We're at best a third away through the video. And it's just like the first one I replied, like, I'm not going to reshoot my bumper for this one thing. Like, that's a lot of work. It is clear to me in comments, slight side tangent to my side tangent, that the average person doesn't actually know what goes into video editing, and I don't expect them to. Like, it's a specialized thing. Most people don't have those skills. I didn't 2 years ago, and I'm still learning as I go. But to comment as if you do know those things is preposterous. Anyway, back to my main tangent. People were like I got actual comments that were like, perhaps you would consider shooting a different one that says we're partway through the video or something similar. It's like, is it bothering you that much? Like, thanks for the engagement though. And like, I was surprised at this response for the Legacy video, and then I just leaned into it for the 2 vintage ones. I was like, I mean, like, there's the practical side of like, I'm gonna put my little blurb in there. I shot it, like it does it serves a function, and I'm not gonna reshoot another one. But at the same time, there was like a little snicker of like, people aren't gonna like this. And I was right. I got a bunch of comments about like, we're not halfway through the video. I did get a really weird comment though, where like after it was on the vintage one where I went 7-2. I feel like I played pretty well. We had a good tournament on camera. I never once did I say like, oh, I messed that up because I'm recording or anything. And somebody took it upon themselves to be like, I know it's a little more editing, but you could record this whole thing and then add commentary later if you want to play better. And it's like, okay, first of all, I think I played pretty well. Never complained, never said a word about the fact that I'm recording. And a little bit of editing doesn't even begin to respect the project that would be. That was a 9-hour tournament. It boiled down to like 2.5 hours of footage, but still, like, I would have to add commentary over those 2.5 hours, which means I would have to watch it once to know what I was about to say, to run through it again. I could record 2 or 3 more entire videos in the time it would take to add voiceover later over that tournament. And I think the quality would be worse. I think that like the in situ, like live thought process is much more interesting and informative than explaining it later. But if you don't actually know what goes into anything, maybe, don't talk about it.
All right.
Thanks for
if we're going to talk about wild comments that we've gotten recently.
Oh, please read this one. I love it.
Oh, you want me to read the one I sent today?
Oh, is that not what you're talking about?
No, but I'll absolutely do that.
You have to read that comment.
Oh, okay. So sometimes you get a comment and like you don't know where the person is coming from, like what walk of life they're in. Okay. So this was a comment left on this Mono White Oketra's Monument video that I played. 1-mana Squadron Hawk is indeed very sexy, but where do be the Batter Skull? Squaw, mutter hacker, release the birds if war.
Yeah, so we get to play the Google Translate, internet brain poison Zoomer talk, or just like, I don't know, is it a 9-year-old? Like, that sort of stuff. Getting those is always a delight. I never delete them. I usually just thumbs up them. I don't respond. I don't delete. I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to let this ride.
Yeah, I just like literally laughed out loud, sent it to these two, and I was just like, this is awesome.
I had a friend comment on one of my vintage videos because I guess in my dress down PO video, I was wearing a button-up shirt. They're like, oh, well, I see you dressed up to dress down. And YouTube deleted that comment twice because he posted it twice. And they just like auto-flagged it for like sexual harassment.
Oh, fair enough. I don't know. Yeah. I guess if I have to err one way or the other, I'd prefer more sexual harassment comments be deleted than not ones stay around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, Phil, what were you going to say?
Yeah, the story I was going to tell is I posted one of my hot videos to Reddit, and somebody commented like, a deck list would be nice. And someone like responds like, bruh, click the link. It's in the video description, just like every time. And they respond like, well, can't do that. I'm at work. It's like,
so you can click a deck list link, but not a YouTube link?
Wait, was this a modern video?
No, I think it was a legacy one.
The modern subreddit, sorry if you are all modern subredditors, are a bunch of assholes. And they go after you super hard if you don't tag all the cards in every post and post the deck list with your deck video link. With your video link. Like, they will come after you.
Yeah, I have definitely found that in the modern subreddit, if you do like a paragraph or two mini article, they're happy with that. Where it's like, I played this, I liked it for the following reasons, this was a cool innovation, here's a link directly to the deck list, and here's the VOD if you want to check it out. I found that flies over there. I don't tag cards, but usually someone is there in minutes, like, doing it for me in the first comment, but I don't know, I just don't post on Reddit anymore. I gave up on that garbage platform.
Yeah, I only post my modern videos there if I know they're going to be bangers. Like when I recorded Soul Sisters, that video is gonna pop off. It's just the sort of thing that does. It has that casual appeal. So it's like, okay, I will spend 10 minutes writing a post to get my extra 1,000 views on this video. Sure.
Yeah, I haven't reached into the Reddit hole in a while. But yeah, I would make the leap for something modern that's cool. I will not post in the Legacy Reddit period for any reason. And I don't know if there is a vintage one. I just haven't looked. I'm sure there is, but
the answer is technically there is, and I post stuff there when I do it, but you'll get your 5 upvotes there. It's that sort of thing.
All right, whatever.
It's better than the manadrain.com.
Oh, the mana drain. How it's fallen from grace. Anyway, speaking of modern, we're at an hour 40 into this pod.
Oh shit. Okay, yeah. Turbo. Let's talk about modern.
Yeah, let's do this real
cool
quick.
Shit going on there. So there was a big Magic event in Las Vegas this weekend alongside all this Eternal Weekend stuff. And I really wanted to highlight one of the top 4 deck lists that was a Infect deck list. And specifically, it was a green-black deck list that was playing Phyrexian Crusader. Now, this is normally not a card that's played in Infect. It is slow. That is a 3-drop in a deck that wants to have you dead on turn 2 or turn 3. That's a no-go. But if you look at the... okay, I should probably read Phyrexian Crusader. This is not a commonly played enough card that people just know it. So it is 1 colorless and 2 black for a 2/2 Zombie Knight. First strike, protection from red and white, in fact. So could one of you just list off a couple of the most common modern removal spells for me real quick?
Unholy Heat, Prismatic Ending,
Lightning Bolt,
Solitude, Fury,
Teferi, Path to Exile.
Right?
Shit.
Right.
This thing is damn near unkillable in modern right now. And this is one of the best examples of a built for a weekend deck list that I have ever seen. Phyrexian Crusader is just the card that if you want a sticky threat, this is superb.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit before we went live. Phil mentioned he wanted to talk about this, and I brought up another Crusader from that block that I won a tournament. When I won the Star City Invitational, I was playing Death and Taxes in a field where Death and Taxes didn't exist. It was a modern tournament. Mono White Taxes was just not really on the radar. I didn't invent the list. I found it somewhere, but it wasn't tiered or really expected. And I had 4 Mirran Crusaders in the deck. And the tier 1 deck at the time was Death Shadow that did not play a single way to remove that card in the main deck. And usually they had 1 Kozilek's return in the sideboard if they had any post-board answer at all. And that Mirran Crusader was basically, again, true name Nemesis, unkillable, untouchable. There's a camera match in the finals of the Star City Invitational playing for 20 grand where my opponent just concedes turn 3. I just turn 3 on the plate, Mirran Crusader, and he was like, okay, next game. Why even bother?
The best part of this story is that the weekend after this event, I message Brian, not knowing him yet, and I say, hey, I'm the Legacy Death and Taxes guy. I saw you did well with this in Modern. Is this deck actually good? And the gist of his response was, no, don't play this. Nope. It was good for that weekend.
Yes, it was a specific field. It was a high skill field. It was only people who qualified for the Star City Invitational. It was a high stakes field. Winning the Invitational matters a lot. And the 2 decks in Modern at the time were Grixis Shadow and Eldrazi Tron. And I was playing a deck with unkillable threats for Grixis Shadow and 8 Wastelands for Eldrazi Tron. And also my creatures were bigger than Tron's. It was like a 4 Blade Splicer, 4 Flicker Wisp deck. Like you flicker your Splicer and Eldrazi Tron can't get through 6 power or first strike. Neither can Death Shadow, for the record. And like Phil, like he said, messaged me, and I was like, no, don't play this. And it wasn't good at any point after that weekend. And it did what it needed to do, which is what this Phyrexian Crusader did this weekend. We're not here to talk about My Glory Days. We're here to talk about Phyrexian Crusader being unkillable in current Modern.
So another thing I wanted to talk about was Crimson Vow injected some new stuff into Modern, very specifically Cultivator Colossus.
Oof.
That card's absurd. I don't have the exact text memorized, but the gist of it is
I'll pull it up.
When it comes into play, you get to draw a card, you can put an extra land into play, and if you do, you repeat the process, and it just creates these absolutely absurd board states where you play one, dump a crap ton of lands out of your hand, and then get a whole bunch of like Field of the Dead triggers or Valakut triggers, whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, it's a 7 mana star trample plant beast. Power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. And the trigger is what Phil said. Draw a card, put a land into play. If you do, repeat. And I've seen the Moto screenshots too. Luckily, I haven't played against this idiot yet, but I've seen Moto screenshots with something like 25 amulet triggers on the stack. It's not Coiling Oracle. It's not like draw your top card. If it's a land, you put it in. You draw a card and then put any land from your hand into play. And amulet has all the bounce lands, plays a high land density anyway. You really do just get to shred through the deck. And if you have amulet in play, the game should end. Like in all reasonable worlds, the game will just end.
Yes, I have not lived through a turn after that thing has hit play. Just 100% mortality rate there.
Yeah, looks like it.
It is not in either of the amulet lists that top-aided Vegas.
I think it was kind of new. And
I'm going to ask a really stupid question. Is Crimson Vow actually legal in paper yet? Because I don't know if the answer is yes.
That's a good question. It may not have been legal in Vegas. I'm trying to remember when the pre-release was.
Because I ran into this problem the other day where, like, I was looking at a deck list and I'm like, why isn't this here? Like, it's not legal, idiot. And I was like, what? I've been playing with this card for 2 weeks online.
I believe Crimson Vow. No, I do think that it came... That set is released. I know my LGS is holding 2 boxes for me, and they wouldn't be doing that if the set wasn't legal. So I think it's been out about a week and a half. May or may not have been legal in Vegas, and this tech would not have been known yet if it was legal. So we're dealing on kind of a tight time frame with that information.
I have a Modern 5K coming up in 2 weeks, and I have not been working on my Lotus Luris Breach deck, so I need to start updating. A card that I was really looking at was Slaughter Pact for the sideboard, and after looking at the top 8 of Vegas, I think I might need to reevaluate that a little bit. I was sort of looking at it as a free way of killing Eidolon of the Great Revel out of the... Like, you board it in, you activate Wishclaw, you get this card, and you kill Eidolon. But it looks like Burn just, like, wasn't really a deck that showed up. I guess in theory you could kill a Primeval Titan with it, or this Colossus, but then you have to pay 3 mana on your turn, which isn't really how you win the game. I don't know.
I feel like these elemental decks can't be good matchups for Burn. Just, there's no price of progress in the format, and Solitude and Fury both answer Eidolon without taking 2 damage. I mean, it's 2 cards, but that's usually worth 2 cards, and it's really hard to cheese with creatures in a format with Solitude and Fury in it.
Might as well twiddle a Lotus then, right?
Yeah, exactly. Ignore that shit.
So I was so surprised that, like, the winning deck list had Kroxa in it. Kroxa is a card that I shit on. Like, every time that I get
It's going to be expensive to go to the bathroom, Phil.
No, it's the same one every time. It's destroyed.
You've heard of a poop knife, but have you heard of the Kroxa wipes?
I'm picturing just a uncut WotC roll of just Kroxas, foil Kroxas that you just tear off and wipe your ass with. The classic PTR banned for life for wiping your ass with a card move.
Now that I've recollected myself a little bit, Kroxa has just been this card that, like, every time I play it in Legacy, it is just, like, beyond a disappointment. Especially since, like, people tend to submit it in deck lists that, like, also have some colorless mana sources, so not every card, like, not every mana pip can, like, potentially cast this card. And when you line Kroxa up versus Uro, like, it's very clear which one of those cards is better. But Modern is a format that is currently devoid of Uro, so having something sticky like Kroxa in an incredibly low-to-the-ground deck otherwise, with like Ragavans, Dragon Rage Channelers, and stuff of that nature, actually ends up being respectable.
Yeah, Kroxa not only doesn't have to compete with Uro, but it fits into the colors and stipulations of Lurrus decks, where you, even if you're not escaping the Kroxa, you are machine gunning it with Lurrus every turn, and it lets you play a backdoor 4-drop in your Lurrus deck.
So something that I found with Modern, and maybe this is only because I'm a combo player, but a lot of players feel like, and maybe this is not different from Legacy, but from my perspective, talking to combo players, it is. They feel like they need an answer to everything. Like, I'll post a video, and the comments I'll get is like, but you don't have an out to this. It's like, do you need an out to everything? Like, a lot of Modern players, because the format is so wide, and I think it's even wider than Legacy, if I'm being honest.
So do I.
Yeah, there's just like more playable decks. Like, it feels a lot like Legacy did in like 2013, in my opinion. And because the format's so wide, people are like, well, you don't have an out to this deck. It's like, yeah, but that deck is like 0.8% of the format. Why do I need an out to it? And only like 75% of those decks play the card you're describing. Like, I just would rather not have that out and play a better card. But in the comment section, people are like, you're ridiculous. How can you not be playing around this?
I believe that the way to play around a lot of things is just do your own broken thing and try to kill your opponent. I have taken that attitude towards sideboarding a lot in Modern, where it's just like, if I win the match versus this deck anyway, it's just because I do my own thing, and every card that I board in is a card that's diluting my deck, keeping me off of my main plan, yada 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 yada. When you can't hit everything, that's reasonable, especially since Modern is a format of like rotating deck quality. Like, there's good weekends to play Affinity, there's good weekends to play graveyard decks and stuff like that, because like there's just too much. The format is too wide for you to cover everything.
Yeah, I like on both of your points. On my Legacy Eternal Weekend video, the Bant deck Splashing Black, there's 0 basics in that deck, and somebody commented on my 3-hour long 10-round video where I went 8-2, insta dead to Blood Moon. That was the whole comment. And it's like, okay, point me to a single deck playing Blood Moon, and point me to how many Blood Moons they have versus my Force of Wills plus negation plus outs to it. Like, once it's resolved, like once I have a couple mana ahead of me, like sure, if I keep a forceless hand against Moon Stompy, I'm gonna lose. But there have been iterations of Legacy's past where Moon Stompy is a premier deck and being insta dead to Blood Moon is disqualifying. But we're not in one right now. And reading the metagame, I also got a comment on I played Werewolf Zoo. It was just like a bunch of werewolves with Collected Company. The deck was not good, but it was a lot of fun. And somebody commented, why are you not playing the best sideboard card in Modern, Veil of Summer? And I asked back, like, I'm an Aether Vial deck and a Cavern of Souls deck to beat counterspells, and all the removal is red and white right now. What is Veil of Summer for? And they replied back, the black deck's removals. It's like, okay, we're not getting anywhere with this conversation. But yeah, context matters. You don't need an answer to everything. And if your deck is proactive, that is an answer to a lot of things. Like that's like the dredge thing in Vintage, like the Bazaar thing, where it's like, do you keep a hand hoping to cantrip into your Ravenous Trap or your Tabernacle, where you might just be dead already? Do you mulligan for Leyline, where they might just play a hollow one and kill you with that against your crippled mulligan hand? Like, having a powerful proactive plan in Modern Hammer Time, like, do you play an answer to Collector Oof, or do you just accept that if your hammer gets knocked off a creature, it's on the ground now? Because you have Sigarda's Aid, you have these other things where you don't actually need to activate any artifacts. Like, there's just calculations to be made there.
I've got a great kind of side story there. So I was playing a Modern League recently. I don't remember exactly what the deck was. I was playing something that had Karn the Great Creator, and I got paired against 2 artifact decks, and I sideboarded out the Karn the Great Creators against both of them. because like the 4 mana was just too slow against what they were doing, even though they were, in theory, a card that might have been good against the artifact deck. And I am just waiting for the comments of like, why did you sideboard out Karn versus the 2 artifact decks? Because that 4 mana card doesn't matter, because like by the time that I have hit turn 4, I've either already won or lost this game, because I've either lived long enough that my more impressive cards can start winning, or like I've already lost the game.
Yeah, you just took 11 poison on turn 2 with a Karn in your hand. Good job.
Oh yeah, oh god, the Karns were in my Amulet deck that I played. Yeah, the Karns were not necessary. The Titans did just fine at killing.
I like the idea of removing Karns from your deck, so I really enjoyed this story.
Yep, good story. I'm sure we'll all do that in the future. Just listeners, the Epic Storm is too fast. You should cut your Karns. A 4-drop's not going to play in that matchup.
This ad was a paid promotion by the Epic Storm.
In Legacy, Karn's a 2-drop.
I will bill you later, Bryant. All right, do we have anything else to say about Modern, Vintage, or anything but Legacy? We're approaching 2 hours. I'm hungry. What do we got?
I have a quick shout out.
Damn it.
There's someone in the combo or the Legacy Storm community Discord where I post a lot about Cycle Storm and Pauper in there, and user Dirty Mac posted a suggestion that blew my mind, and I'm not sure why I haven't thought of it. I've been playing Darkness, and on a bunch of my videos, people are complaining about how expensive it's making my deck and how it's unaffordable now. And they came up with a solution that's actually just better than playing Darkness. I could be playing Spore Frog, Prophecy All-Star, because I started splashing green 2 weeks ago. So not only is it cheap, it fits one of my splash colors, but it counts towards Reaping the Graves and Songs of the Damned. My mind literally just blew at work today. I'm like, how do I buy Japanese foil Spore Frogs? Who has them? How do I get these? So super excited that once this is over, I'm going to go buy Spore Frogs on Magic Online.
I know you're used to swimming in these Japanese foil waters, but holy guacamole, you gotta PM me the number when you find those Japanese foil Prophecy Spore Frogs, because I imagine it will be shocking.
I mean, I owned a regular foil Spore Frog for an EDH deck back in the day when I did that. And I remember like hunting that down and like prying that out of someone's trade binder was actually difficult. Like that was sought after for casual table reasons.
Yeah, it's been reprinted since those days. Like I think that card was like a $50, $60 foil back when like Dark Confidant was like a $50 foil. Like it was like a chase foil in the early days of EDH. And it does get occasional Pauper play. And like the more cards that get printed, the better it is. Like I've seen it in Marin EDH decks. Marin's the 4-drop that you gain experience counters when a creature dies. And then you can put reanimate a creature in every end step that costs less than your experience. So like Spore Frog is, if it's in play, you just pop it, get an experience counter, go to your end step, it's back. And like there's just stuff like that. There's all sorts of engines around Spore Frog, and it's gotten a reprint since those early days, but I imagine the original printing is still just hotter than the sun.
In the early days of Legacy, Angry Tradewind Survival was a pinnacle of the format, and it played Genesis into Spore Frog. And there was a lot of decks in the format that literally just couldn't beat it. And they'd be like,
good luck,
all right,
goblins.
Next game. And their out to it was like, I guess we're going to board in like Graveyard Hate for Genesis.
Yeah, I was not playing Legacy at that time, but I was in game stores where my friends did. And I remember one of my friends like buying Taigas and Survivals and stuff for that deck. I'm sure they were like $10, $15 at the time. And I should have done the same.
Should have bought dual lands instead of those packs of Onslaught.
Yeah, fucking Onslaught.
Whatever
Wasted
good came
energy
from that set anyway.
Yeah, just one of the most heinously broken sets of cards in Magic's history that almost every Eternal format relies on for their very existence.
Skirk Prospector and Goblin Piledriver? Is that what we're talking about?
Yep, that's definitely what I'm talking about. Thanks for listening to our episode. All right, for real, anyone else want to have a closing thought?
Let's hope that by the time this episode's live that we have a band announcement.
Well, it goes out on Friday, and they only do that on Mondays, so that won't be true. But let's hope that something moves in the right direction before we have to record again.